The year is 2025. The world has changed in many ways, but some things remain constant. One of those constants is the ever-evolving landscape of international trade and economic policies. Donald Trump, back in the Oval Office, has made good on his promise to put America first, with a new wave of tariffs. His return to power has reignited debates and discussions about the future of global trade and America's role in it. These tariffs, essentially taxes on imported goods, target a range of products from China, the European Union, and other key trading partners. The scope of these tariffs is vast, affecting industries and economies far and wide. The stated goal? To protect American jobs and industries from what Trump calls unfair foreign competition. This protectionist stance is aimed at revitalizing domestic manufacturing and reducing dependency on foreign imports. These tariffs are not without precedent. Trump's previous administration imposed significant tariffs on Chinese goods, sparking a trade war that rattled global markets. The ripple effects were felt across continents, affecting everything from stock markets to consumer prices. This time, the stakes are even higher. The global economy, still recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, faces renewed uncertainty. The pandemic left economies fragile, and the introduction of new tariffs adds another layer of complexity to the recovery process. The new tariffs cover a wide range of goods from steel and aluminum to electronics and automobiles. These industries are critical to both the American economy and the global supply chain, making the impact of these tariffs far-reaching. The impact is immediate. Prices for these goods are expected to rise, potentially affecting millions of American consumers and businesses. Inflation, already a concern, could be exacerbated by these new trade policies. The Trump administration argues that these tariffs are necessary to protect American jobs and industries. They believe that by imposing these tariffs, they can level the playing field for American workers and businesses. They claim that foreign countries have been taking advantage of the United States for too long, flooding the market with cheap goods and undercutting American workers. This narrative has been a cornerstone of Trump's economic policy, resonating with many who feel left behind by globalization. Historically, trade agreements like NAFTA and the establishment of the World Trade Organization aim to create a more interconnected global economy. These agreements were designed to reduce trade barriers and promote economic cooperation. However, critics argue that these agreements have often favored multinational corporations at the expense of local industries and workers. The debate over the benefits and drawbacks of free trade versus protectionism is as old as the concept of trade itself. American farmers, for instance, have been both beneficiaries and victims of these trade policies. While access to international markets has boosted exports, retaliatory tariffs have sometimes hurt their bottom line. The tech industry, on the other hand, thrives on global supply chains and international collaboration. Tariffs on electronic components and devices could stifle innovation and increase costs for consumers. Small businesses, often the backbone of the American economy, may find it challenging to absorb the increased costs of imported goods. This could lead to higher prices for consumers or reduced profit margins for these businesses. Internationally, these tariffs could strain relationships with key allies and trading partners. Diplomatic efforts to resolve trade disputes will be crucial in the coming years. Domestically, the response to these tariffs is mixed. Labor unions and some manufacturing sectors support the move, hoping it will lead to job creation and higher wages. However, consumer advocacy groups and some economists warn of the potential negative impacts on prices and economic growth. Educational institutions are also weighing in, with many universities offering courses and seminars on the implications of these new trade policies. Students and scholars are analyzing the potential long-term effects on both the American and global economies. Another area of concern is the renewable energy sector. Tariffs on imported solar panels and wind turbine components could slow the transition to cleaner energy sources, impacting efforts to combat climate change. The healthcare industry is not immune either. Tariffs on medical equipment and pharmaceuticals could lead to higher healthcare costs, affecting both providers and patients. The global supply chain, already under strain from the pandemic, faces additional challenges. Disruptions in the flow of goods could lead to delays and shortages, further complicating the economic recovery. Financial analysts are closely monitoring the situation, with many predicting volatility in the stock markets. Economic forecasts are being revised as the full impact of these tariffs becomes clearer. In the end, the true impact of Trump's 2025 trade shock will depend on a multitude of factors. The resilience of the American economy, the response of international trading partners, and the adaptability of businesses and consumers will all play a role. As we move forward, one thing is certain: the landscape of global trade is shifting. How we navigate these changes will define the economic future of not just the United States, but the world. Stay tuned as we continue to explore the evolving dynamics of international trade and its impact on our daily lives. The most immediate and tangible impact of Trump's tariffs is felt by ordinary Americans. These tariffs, essentially taxes on imported goods, have a ripple effect that touches nearly every aspect of daily life. When tariffs are imposed, the cost of importing goods increases, and these costs are often passed down to consumers. This means that the price of many everyday items, from groceries to gasoline, can rise significantly. From the gas pump to the grocery store, the prices of everyday goods are on the rise. This is not just a minor inconvenience. For many families, it represents a substantial financial strain. Imagine a family that already has a tight budget. They might have to make difficult choices, such as cutting back on essential items or forgoing small luxuries. The increase in prices can be particularly hard on low-income families, who spend a larger portion of their income on necessities. The tariffs passed on to consumers by importers and retailers act as a hidden tax, eating into household budgets. This hidden tax is not immediately visible, but its effects are felt over time. As the cost of goods rises, families may find that their money does not go as far as it used to. This can lead to increased financial stress and anxiety as families struggle to make ends meet. The impact is not just financial, it can also affect the overall well-being and quality of life for many Americans. For American families already struggling with stagnant wages and rising costs of living, the tariffs represent a significant financial burden. Many families have not seen their incomes increase in real terms for years, while the cost of living continues to rise. This means that any additional expense, such as higher prices due to tariffs, can be particularly challenging to manage. Families may have to dip into their savings, take on additional debt, or cut back on other expenses to cope with the increased costs. The price increases are particularly acute in sectors heavily reliant on imported goods, such as electronics, automobiles, and clothing. These are items that many people consider essential, and higher prices can make them less accessible. For example, a family might need to replace a broken appliance or buy a new car, but the increased costs could make these purchases more difficult. This can lead to delays in making necessary purchases, which can have a ripple effect on the economy as a whole. The tariffs also threaten to stifle economic growth. When prices rise, consumers may cut back on spending, which can lead to a slowdown in economic activity. This is particularly concerning because consumer spending is a key driver of the U.S. economy. If people are spending less, businesses may see a decline in sales, which can lead to lower profits and potentially even layoffs. This can create a negative feedback loop, where reduced spending leads to slower economic growth, which in turn leads to further reductions in spending. As prices rise, consumer spending, a key driver of the U.S. economy, is likely to slow down. This slowdown can have far-reaching effects, impacting not just individual families but also businesses and the broader economy. When people spend less, businesses may see a decline in sales, which can lead to lower profits and potentially even layoffs. This can create a negative feedback loop where reduced spending leads to slower economic growth, which in turn leads to further reductions in spending. Businesses facing higher input costs due to tariffs on raw materials and components may be forced to raise prices, further dampening consumer demand. This can create a challenging environment for businesses, particularly small businesses that may have less flexibility to absorb higher costs. Higher prices can also make it more difficult for businesses to compete, both domestically and internationally. This can lead to a decline in business investment, which can further slow economic growth. The administration's argument that the tariffs will protect American jobs is met with skepticism by many economists. While the intention behind the tariffs may be to protect domestic industries, the reality is often more complex. Higher costs for imported goods can lead to higher prices for consumers, which can reduce demand and potentially lead to job losses. Additionally, other countries may retaliate with their own tariffs, which can further disrupt trade and economic activity. While some sectors might see a temporary boost, the overall impact on employment is likely to be negative. For example, Industries that rely heavily on imported materials may see higher costs, which can lead to reduced production and potentially even layoffs. Additionally, if other countries impose retaliatory tariffs, this can further disrupt trade and economic activity, leading to job losses in affected industries. The net effect is likely to be a reduction in overall employment rather than an increase. Higher prices and reduced demand could lead to job losses in retail, manufacturing, and other sectors. This can create a challenging environment for workers, particularly those in industries that are heavily affected by tariffs. Job losses can lead to increased financial stress and uncertainty for affected workers and their families. Additionally, reduced demand can lead to lower profits for businesses, which can further exacerbate economic challenges. The overall impact of tariffs is likely to be complex and multifaceted, affecting not just individual families and businesses, but the broader economy as a whole.